This is Omnivore presents SciDish, a podcast from the Institute of Food Technologists. In each episode, we take a deeper dive into a single topic shaping the future of food. Hosted by the editors of Food Technology, together with IFT members and subject matter experts, SciDish brings you the science, insights, and real-world perspectives that drive innovation, solve complex challenges, and connect disciplines across the global food system. Thanks for joining us. Let's get into the conversation.
This episode of Omnivore is brought to you by IFT FIRST, food improved by research, science, and technology. Join the leading food science and innovation expo, IFT FIRST, at McCormick Place in Chicago, July 12th through 15th, for the industry's premier event connecting innovation, science, and business. Learn more at ift.org.
Welcome to our conversation about dispelling scientific misinformation and building trust in food science and the food industry. I'm Mary Ellen Kuhn, Executive Editor of Food Technology Magazine. Today, I'm fortunate to be speaking with two experts in scientific communication, Linda Eatherton and Veronica Jarmillo. Linda is a veteran science communicator. At Eatherton Communications, she helps food and beverage companies create and retool brand positioning. Prior to this role, she spent more than 2 decades leading Ketchum's global food and beverage practice. Earlier in her career, she held leadership roles at Kraft Foods and Dairy Management, Inc. Veronica is a food scientist and co-founder of the Food Truth Project, an initiative that tackles misinformation about food, nutrition, and agriculture via workshops and social media, educating and empowering audiences. She also contributes to Unbiased Science, a collective of experts in public health dedicated to effectively communicating scientific data and insights. I know both Linda and Veronica have lots of great perspectives about the challenges of trust building and communicating accurately and authentically about science. So let's get our conversation started. Let's start by talking about the trust gap. Linda and Veronica, you're both science communicators, so you're close to the topic of misinformation and trust in science. Veronica, when it comes to food science and the food industry, just how big is the trust gap? And to what extent do you think the average consumer is mistrustful of the food system?
I definitely think that there is a trust gap, unfortunately, between our industry, the food scientists, and the average consumer. And I think the trust gap is relatively big. And unfortunately, I do think it stems from the fact that we as, North Americans are pretty disconnected from our food system. And while food is everywhere in our life, 3 times a day, we have to eat it. We enjoy eating it. It's part of our culture. We love food. We are disconnected from the fact in the sense that the average person, I think, don't know where their food comes from. We don't know how it's grown. We don't know the farmers behind it. We don't know the technology and the science that goes behind it. And we really are generally unaware of how food comes from the farm to the plate. And I don't think there is one entity or one person to blame here. But because there is such a disconnect and a lack of literacy when it comes to our food and nutrition, it really opens up the opportunity. It opens up the floodgates for people to insert their own opinion or their own messaging, whether that be truthful or not. And sometimes I really do believe that our media system and our media landscape right now banks off the fact that the average person has a low level of nutrition and food literacy. And it's much easier to persuade someone to believe something when they are less informed or not informed at all about that topic at hand. And I think that's been made tremendously clear in our media landscape changing, amplifying the voices of sometimes unqualified people, spreading misleading messages, whether they know it or not. And that itself erodes the trust tremendously. So I think it's a combination of multiple things. It's a combination of we are disconnected as a community, as a population from our food systems, and there is just too much information out there, and we don't know what to believe. So I think there's a combination of multiple facts.
Well, I look forward to getting a little more into that whole misinformation idea. But Linda, I wanted to get your perspective because you have decades of experience communicating about food. Is the situation now and the lack of trust bigger than it ever has been in the past?
Mary Ellen, we are a very blessed society here in America and North America in particular. We have had an abundance of food for generations. We have an abundance of technology. We have an abundance of opportunities to experience those foods made with those technologies, whether it's agricultural or at the bench. And with more comes more confusion, more interest. And with interest that has not received clear, concise information, you get confusion. Confusion leads to mistrust and distrust. What we have in front of us is a lot of unfamiliarity with a topic that is deeply personal to us. What we're lacking is not an amount of information, more information. We're lacking clear, familiar information that is consistent. And this is what I believe our industry needs to focus on. We need to find a way to unite as an industry to build a clarity of understanding and knowledge in a very consistent and familiar way by first establishing a relationship between scientists, whether they're agricultural scientists or food bench scientists, and the public. I know I'm sounding rather simplistic, but the answer is somewhat simple and yet deeply, deeply difficult to deliver. It requires unanimity. It requires all of us to recognize that their needs, their confusion, their concerns are more important than our story. Start where they are. What's in their hearts? What's driving their concern? What do they need to know? Why is my scientific story important to them? Right? That's where the story starts. That's where the information starts. And so I think in many ways, it's important that we begin to think about our stories differently. Flip the script, if you will. Flip the script so that we start with their values and their emotions and dig deep to figure out why these consumers have questions. And don't just answer the question. Address the values and the fears behind the question.
Today, we're going to talk a little bit more about how to go about it and where to start. But before we do that, I want to ask about misconceptions. And what are some of the biggest misconceptions about science, science in general and food science in particular, of course, that you're seeing right now, Veronica?
So I think I'd preface this by saying that most of my work that I do is online. So it's on social media. I do a lot of science communication. And I also, I do public speaking, but this is what I'm seeing online in different community groups, specifically on social medias like TikTok, Instagram, etc. So I think the biggest misconception that we're seeing in food science and in food in general, and this is also intertwined with other themes like wellness and health information. And it's not a topic per se, but it's rather like a theme. And the theme that I'm seeing is, in short, this just in, everything you knew about food is wrong. That's what I'm seeing. It's all over my page. It's like, oh, didn't you know that the thing you thought of for the past 20 years is actually incorrect? That's what I'm seeing all over the place with a bunch of different topics. But it's information that's presented in a way that makes people feel like their preconceived notions and what they known all of their life when it comes to food was actually a lie. And once they get this new information from either this influencer with 100,000 followers or from this viral video, is that they're in on the secret now. So I finally know the truth about my food because now I'm in on the secret. And now that they have this information, they feel like they're superior and they can lead healthier lives now with this decision. And while everyone else is doing, their routines with the old information, They're getting shafted, but I have this new information and I feel better now. And I've seen this phenomena over again, and with variety of topics. Like one I can think of on my head is seed oils. That's a really big one. There's so many videos that come out in the last 5 years and articles of just being like, did you know that you've been using this for the past 15 years and it's actually giving you cancer? Like these crazy claims with something that we've been using for generations. And it's like seed oils I've seen, ultra processed food or processed food, what that really means, anything and everything to do with protein, artificial sweeteners. The variety of topics, but it's with that same theme, the same theme of everything you knew is wrong. And I'm the holder of the actual correct information and you should listen to me. So that's the theme that I'm seeing the most in our world right now. That is most concerning to me.
Well, you certainly touched a lot on a lot of the big ones. Linda, did you want to add to anything to that?
I think Veronica absolutely captured it. Honestly, with social media and becoming more digitized and more sort of democratized, if you will, every person with a computer is a reporter. It has changed the dynamics of communication greatly. And everyone can be an expert for a minute or more, or self-declared. And that raises a whole lot of new questions. The truth is that who you trust is critically important, but you learn to trust differently in this world that Veronica describes. You trust differently. What we're finding through research and through experience in this digitized world, consumers trust people who are most like them. In this day and age, who you trust is truly more important because who you trust is actually what you trust. And so I would argue that we, again, are in a new environment, and we need to begin to build relationships of trust that are predicated on human needs and values, not science, first. Then, once we have established an army of individuals willing to be part of our sort of trust circle, we're given permission at that point to share information. We have to earn permission to tell our story. And I know that sounds strange because we come from a large body of experts and expertise and authorities who feel very validated that they've gone through a body of science and scientific rigor, and they should be able to present their data as this is the current science. There's certainly no restriction on that, but it isn't going to get you very far with the general public.
We'll be back with more Omnivore in a moment. But first, this word from our sponsor.
IFT, the Institute of Food Technologists, invites you to join your colleagues across the Food Science Network at IFT FIRST this July 12th to 15th at Chicago's McCormick Place. For the first time, all scientific programming will happen directly in the expo hall, creating seamless connections between research and real-world applications. You'll have the opportunity to learn about cutting-edge science, then immediately explore available solutions with exhibitors in one dynamic environment. Get connected with cutting-edge tech, global leaders, and the innovations shaping our food future. Registration is open. Secure your spot today at IFT.org. That's IFT.org.
I want to stay with you a minute and just ask about the food industry. Would you say that the food industry really bears some of the responsibility for the fact that there is this trust gap? Why or why not?
I actually think the trust gap is a team sport. I think everyone bears responsibility here. Every single player. And this is what I was referring to earlier about the need for a unified effort. I can remember way back in the day and I'm sure you can too, Mary Ellen, when the fear of fat being found in a food label sent people into an absolute tizzy. And I can remember the headlines, and I can remember the churning and gnashing of teeth behind the doors of major food companies, and the worry of, oh my gosh, when consumers figure out after the NLEA label is put on my product that there's actually fat in it, we're sunk. The truth is, we recognized right then and there the way to work through this situation was to work together. We built industry coalitions. We built industry organizations. We formed a unified effort to address those concerns and that information before it became a big problem. In this case, we have not gotten out ahead of the issue. We're on our heels. And so now the climb is a bigger climb, but it's not an absolutely impossible climb. It can be done.
Okay, we're going to talk about that. And before we do, though, Veronica, did you have anything to add to that about, who bears responsibility for the situation we're in right now where there is a big trust gap?
I think Linda put it very perfectly, and I'll echo what she said in the fact that it is a team sport. It's the onus isn't on one person, one entity, one individual. It's on all of us. It's on the consumer to have a working food and nutrition literacy. It's on the consumer, or it's on the industry to effectively communicate. I think it's a combination of a lot of things, but the lack of communication on the side of the food industry, I think, has eroded some trust in the consumer, and the lack of accessibility of that information. Is it deep hidden in your website? Did it take me 20 minutes to find where you sourced your ingredients? Is it not there at all? Or is it there open for everyone to see? And that changes a lot between the dynamic of the consumer and the industry and how trust is established. So it's a team sport. It's on us, but it's also on them. But definitely, I agree with what Linda said.
Well, Linda, let's talk further about what you've been alluding to, like building that relationship and working together among the various entities within the food system. Where does that start?
In my opinion, it starts at the scientific level. We are not grooming a generation of communicators and marketers to understand the technology and the innovation from the ground up. We're not grooming them to trust it, to understand it, and as an industry, we are not working together on creating a unified, clear, consistent story around those technologies. I believe as scientists, we need to take on the mantle of communicator as scientists. I truly do. I know that there are those who are deeply involved in the scientific rigor, and they will always be there, and that's their role. But it's our time and it's our turn to build a cadre of very highly educated scientific communicators to translate the science for marketers and businesses who are going to be selling these products and these ideas to the public. There's a huge gap here. It is up to our scientific community and our marketing and communications communities to come together and build a new discipline of science and communication that is the bridge between innovation, marketing, and commercialization.
So as a follow-up to that, I'm just wondering, are you thinking that communicators need to be more knowledgeable about the science and the scientists need to be more knowledgeable about communicating?
Yes.
Okay, I got it.
It's both. It's both. Again, it goes back to the team sport. There's no one group, one individual. We are all going to have to lift this heavy load together.
Veronica, let's get tactical. I know you do the nitty-gritty work of science communication, as does Linda, but could you share a little bit about how those in the food system could go about building trust, say from the ground up as a new product is developed and launched?
Definitely. I think I also will preface this by saying I'm new to the food industry. I am freshly graduated, and maybe I don't have as much experience as some of my colleagues, but I do have a new perspective as a Gen Z. I am born in the age of social media. I feel like I have a good understanding of what my age group and what my demographic wants. And I think what my demographic and what all demographics want alike is transparency. I don't think anyone feels or anyone wants to feel like they're out of the loop and that they're the last one to get this information. I think that people want to know exactly what's in their food and they want to know the science behind it. And I feel like we're not doing a good enough job at really explaining that. And it's not because it's not interesting, because it is very interesting. And maybe I'm biased, of course, because I love food and I'm a food scientist and I think this is super interesting. But when we don't communicate and we don't say what's in the food, how it's made, how it's created, how it's grown, there's no information there and people are going to fill the gaps. It's someone will fill the gap where there's a gap of information. And that will come sometimes in the hands of people who don't have that knowledge, will just fill it maybe to benefit themselves, benefit what they're selling, their platform, everything. So it's up to us and it's up to the food industry to fill that information gap. And there is nothing to hide. And I'm saying this from a perspective of someone who now works in regulatory. Everything we do is by the law. We have these food additives that have been rigorously tested, evaluated, and put in specific amounts in this food to benefit both us and the consumer and the cost of the food. There's a reason why we're doing all of these things. It is science-backed. Why is no one talking about this? And from my perspective as a regulatory scientist, it's like, this is so cool. We have decades of science backing up this certain additive that makes food more delicious or makes it more accessible or makes it more nutritious or affordable. There's so many great, inventions and technologies around food. And I'm just curious why we're not speaking about it enough. And I feel like the average consumer doesn't know that. They think that the food industry can just put whatever they want in food and it's like a free for all. And they just dump a bunch of additives and they put filler in food, air quotes on the word filler. And there's just no knowledge there. The consumer doesn't know what's in our food. And then people are going to fill those gaps for us. So transparency, I think, is so, so important. Why ingredients are put in your formulation, why certain others aren't. Talk about where ingredients are sourced, to what's on the label, why these claims are on the label. I think it's so important to share that information now more than ever. And the consumer, as Linda was saying earlier, they're interested, they're curious, they want to know. And I don't think we're doing it enough. So I think transparency would be my number one answer there.
Well, I love getting the Gen Z perspective always. But kind of building on that, isn't part of the problem that science is complicated? I've heard someone say that, the answer in science is sometimes, well, it depends. And science is also evolving. So do you think that is part of the problem and part of the reason why this whole communication challenge is so great?
Definitely. I think it's a mix of a lot of different aspects, but the way that we consume most of our information now, at least in my generation, is without a doubt on social media. And there's a couple things to take into account here. But the one I want to get across right now is the use of the social media algorithm and how it works. So the information that is most likely to reach you on your algorithm has been tested with people before you. If the information catches you right away, it makes you more likely to stay on that video, stay on that post, stay on the app. The algorithm will understand that and it will take that piece of content and give it to a lot more people because it understands that that piece of information is hooking people on this app. It's making you stay there longer. And the information that does the best on social media is that quick, not very nuanced, hot take kind of information. And that doesn't always bode well with what we give in the scientific community, which is, very nuanced, very, it's not our opinion. This is what the data says. There's not really that much emotion that goes behind it. There's not that much feeling. It is the data. And that doesn't do that well on social media. It's the quick, not nuanced hot take. This is what you can do and apply to your life right here, right now. That is what people want, because frankly, people don't have the time or the resources or the attention span anymore for the long-winded explanation of something. And they want something that they can take right away, they can apply to their life, and that often comes with a not nuanced take of something that takes a lot of time, a lot of rigorous explanation. So what we could do from our perspective is, of course, we can play that game too. Why can't we give fast information that is exciting, that makes people want to engage with it? We can, but that's an art in itself, is taking science, and that's the whole art of science communication, is taking what we've done, taking decades of research, and then putting it into this engaging, fun, easy to interact with, accessible piece of information that does well on these social media platforms. That is the challenge that we're facing right now.
That makes sense. And Linda, I do want to come back to you and the whole idea of building the relationship. Talk to us a little bit more about that.
Well, I think it's very interesting that Veronica has given us such a perfect landscape of the digital communications environment. And most people don't see that as a relationship building tool. And yet it is. It's very much a relationship building tool. It requires that you feed that algorithm with information that matters to someone else. It requires that you feed that algorithm daily, like watering a plant. To be the expert and have all the answers is not the goal of relationship building. The goal is to be heard and to be understood. The goal is to empathize and to understand what the other person or persons you're talking to through that digital format are trying to say. Interpreting it, bringing it to a new level of understanding, empathizing with it instead of criticizing it. Relationship building online is really not a lot different than going to a gigantic cocktail party. This is what I always tell my clients. I mean, I have some that are very intimidated by communications online. And I said, many of us are not great at cocktail parties. We almost dread them. And the truth of the matter is, you're in a sea of people you don't know, you've never met in your life. You have your glass of wine in your hand or your beer, and all you can think is, I just want to get out of here, right? Your job in that cocktail party, just like this digital party, is to start asking questions. Ask relevant questions. Get other people talking about themselves, about what they care about, what they're interested in, what they're concerned about. Keep asking. Don't answer the questions. Just keep asking. Share. Do you have similar feelings? Do you have similar experiences? Share those. When you feel you have built a rapport with that person at that cocktail party, you might be invited by that person. Tell me more. That's the golden moment, when you are being invited to tell me more. And that's how we weave digital and intrapersonal communications, is we get to the tell me more moment, because that's when your audience is giving you permission to tell your story. That's what we need to work for.
I absolutely love that cocktail party analogy. So true. Well, I feel like we could be talking a long time, but since we do have a set time span, let's end this on a positive note. I want to ask each of you what is one thing that makes you optimistic that it is possible to bridge the gap between food science and consumer confidence. And we'll hop back to you, Veronica.
Well, I am optimistic. I'll put it that way. I don't like thinking, well, maybe my mind can go there for sure of being like, oh, wow, like this is a never ending issue. But I have seen and I have experienced firsthand of connecting with people both in person and online. And I've connected with them in the sense that we were able to open up the floor on a topic that maybe we didn't agree upon, but we were both able to have an empathetic, adult, mature conversation about my opinions and my feelings, their opinions and their feelings. And we were able to have a conversation that invoked empathy, understanding, and respect for the other person. And while that may not be the case all the time on social media, and we can feel that we're in this like echo chamber of just negativity and disagreements, I have seen it happen and I have experienced it firsthand. And that is the thing that lets me be optimistic and keeps going.
Thank you. Linda, what about you?
I too am very optimistic about the future. One, because the abundance of questions, even if they are unanswered, tells me there's a general curiosity. There's a need to know. And if there's a need to know, it can be filled, right? And like Veronica, I've seen many, many examples and have actually devised and created many examples of open and public private forums where conversation is had at a respectable level, where the polarity may be there, but the vitriol has been removed. It is possible. It is possible. It needs to be supervised. It needs to be constructed. It needs to be created. And those forums are not typically online. They can be. They can be done online. But it takes money and it takes sponsorship to bring together multiple different types of audiences into one place and to begin managing a conversation on a very professional level. But it can be done. It has been done.
Linda and Veronica, thank you both very much for such a thoughtful conversation about building trust in science.
Our thanks to IFT FIRST, Food Improved by Research, Science, and Technology, for supporting this episode. Don't miss the leading food science and innovation expo coming to Chicago this July. Explore the future of food innovation and register today at IFT.org.
And that concludes this episode of Omnivore Presents SciDish. Thanks again to our guests for another amazing discussion. SciDish is produced by the Institute of Food Technologists and the editors of Food Technology magazine. To learn more about IFT and how we convene global food system professionals to advance the science of food, visit IFT.org. If you're not already a member, head to IFT.org/membership to find your place in the IFT community. For more insights, ideas, and innovation, check out our sister podcast, Omnivore, on the News and Publications page of IFT.org. Join us again next month for another timely discussion. This is Omnivore Presents SciDish.